or ownership.
And hauled hay, and I don't know what everybody else kinds of work that people do. This is not that hard, and it certainly is enjoying. We have talked to so many good people, and then we get out here, we have our friends and our brethren and our workmates and individuals that we run into and talk to on television come out and visit with us, and it's just a grand time. But it's hard in the sense of, this part makes me sick, because there's no doubt, and there's just no doubt tonight, we are at this moment entering a struggle with Satan. I mean, we are about to enter a struggle with Satan. We have every tool that we can think of in order to win the struggle. When I say tools, look at the technology that's up under here. And you might not be awed with it, but it's the latest. The satchels that I have up here, this is not in any way designed to try to impress. These are tools. I've got books in here that are 500 years old. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? That's the struggle we're in. I've never owned a car that costs more than my library. That's how important this is. Me getting them down the road in ease and in luxury has not been comparable to the struggle, the tools that we use in the struggle. And so tonight, as we look at ourselves for a moment, we need to let the walls down, and we're here, and if we're going to be here, it's the point of trying to examine. We have no problem with the ideology as we're on Facebook, as we're going up to YouTube, and as we send these out on television. We don't have any problem with the ideology set forth real clearly. We are trying to convince people of the era that they're in. Now, there's just nothing wrong with that. I mean, somebody's got to be right and somebody's got to be wrong, and we all know the Bible's right. So when it comes down to it, it's not about any of us being necessarily brighter, more endowed or anything like that in our brain power. It's who actually is paying attention to the words of God. Now, when we look at the Muslims, he says, I've decided to convert to Christianity, then you must kneel. And then he says, and pray. And we know he's fixing to kill him. And we just say, man, those Muslims, they out there, aren't they? And we would not want Muslims to be in charge of our nation and have Sharia law, which basically means we would be using their book for our government. In other words, you would have some Ayatollah who would be dictating out the laws. We don't want that. But you know what? We do need to be consistent. And when I say we need to be consistent, we need to realize that there are people out there who have sense enough to actually look into religion and say, this is a bunch of foolishness on some levels. Now let you listen to this guy. He lives here in Danville, and I'm not just using him in the sense of just saying that people are looking at the religious arena as foolish. I'm also saying, look how late it's getting. This guy is out there. You thought Larry Serber was out there? This is Larry Serber on steroids and Bob Lawson on steroids. This dude is out there. And he's right over here on Whispering Pines. You know, he may not like that. I'm not trying to get anybody to go to his house or anything like that. I do have his address, but I'm not advocating that. Let me get this going.
We want to know who you are, because we actually, when he put you on TV, said that you're...
I have a guy with a master's degree.
If you were at all afraid of losing your position, you know, I think Christ would, had he lived, would not have ascended to the level that Paul wanted. Paul wanted to set up a corporation, the first Christian corporation. You look at every evolution of the church through that whole period, and it was basically about establishing male privilege and male power.
Okay. You're talking about the Catholic Church.
What's that?
You're talking about the Catholic Church.
I know Martin Luther personally. I'm telling you, yes, all of the divinations that we have that come off of that are all part of the same root problem, which is the assumption of rightness.
We're saying the same thing about all these religions.
Integrate all these other people?
You don't know us.
No, but I don't care. I don't need to.
I'm just saying there's got to be somebody that's different. I'm talking about Danville. Okay. Now, the part I wanted you to specifically hear was, he said that Paul was outdoing Jesus, and he said every religious group is basically trying to make themselves a corporation. And you know what he's talking about. He's basically saying a money-making enterprise. And he's pretty much right when you start looking around. We're talking about the Muslims, and he's looking into religion, and he's seeing $10 million empires over here. Jimmy Swaggart had his own zip code down in Louisiana. Seriously? Louisiana's one of the poorest states in the Union. You got this guy, got so much money coming in, he's got his own zip code. And this fella, he was a youth pastor in a Southern Baptist how many years ago, 40 years ago. And he basically started broadening his brain, is what he's saying, and he saw through it. And I'm saying, you know what? He is exactly right on some fronts. And to us, Mark, the Catholic Church is not the only one. I'm saying tonight that we need to look into, a great and long look into religious history. John Calvin was a murderer. He's just like the Catholics when you really get down to it. A lot of people don't know that John Calvin was invited into Geneva. He was run out of Geneva once, and he was invited back into Geneva. And when he got back into Geneva, he set up a religious state. He set up a synod or a council, lay people, maybe 19 of them and 29 of the bishop type, something of that sort. And they ended up legislating. Now, they did have a civil government, but that doesn't change the fact that even though they had a civil government, he actually was involved in dictating what were moral crimes. One moral crime in Geneva would be heresy. Look at this. Within 5 years, 58 sentences of death and 76 of exile, besides the numerous committals of the most eminent citizens to prison, took place in Geneva. This is during the reign of John Calvin. The reformer, Michael Servetus, basically, the reformer is John Calvin. He calls Servetus arrogant. He had dared to criticize the institutes and marginal glosses and uttered the significant menace. This is what John Calvin said. If he comes here and I have any authority, I will never let him leave the place alive. They burned him at the stake. He came to Geneva, and he was going to discuss with... Now, if you get online and listen to these scholars today argue about Calvinism and argue about Calvin, they will tell you that he didn't have anything to do with Servetus or Savet. Some people, he's got several different names. He had aliases because he was running from the Catholics also. They'll say, no, he really didn't do it. So tonight, as we think about this proposal, this idea of, okay, the Muslims, and now we're turning around here and we're saying that John Calvin, basically the founder of the Presbyterian Church. Now, I just need to go over this. I just feel like we need to go over this. Do you know, as an American, if you had been living in the time of Calvin, there is no way that you would be following Calvin. That's just not going to happen. And I don't understand. And do you all know why I'm saying that? We are freedom-loving individuals, and he was a tyrant. And if we would have been living back there, you know, in order to actually get a look at this, you have to put it in historical perspective. And when I say historical perspective, you ever think about us as Americans, why it is the Europeans look at us the way they do? From our mother's bosom, it is breathed into us that we're free, that we came here, our ancestors came here because of religious tyranny. And they occupied this country. And we have built this country on that principle, no tyrant. And it was John Calvin that these people were running from. It was Martin Luther. I mean, read the historical documents. You would not want to be involved with Martin Luther. He was the same way. Heresy is punishable by death. Now, here we are, and these people in Europe look at us and they gawk at us as we walk around and they see us shooting and y'all shooting and different things of that nature, and it's like, these Americans. Sometimes I was in Australia once and I heard a guy, as we went in the store, he said, somebody asked who these guys were, and he called us septic tank Yanks. You know, why do they gawk at us? Well, it's because of the way we are. And here's the thing. The fact of the matter is, when they get disgusted with tyranny in their own country and basically take up arms and try to overcome them, who do they look to? Well, they look to us, and we look to them too. We don't look at them in disgust and say, well, what y'all think y'all doing? And we say, it's about time. And then we go and help them. See, that's historical perspective. That's why Americans are the way they are. And Europeans are the other way. It's because they've been putting up with it for years, since the Roman Catholic Church and all of these reformers supposedly. Now let's put Calvin in perspective. Why did Calvin and Luther do what they did? They were in the shadow of the Roman Catholic Church. Now y'all, when you think about this idea of born in sin and faith only, do you realize these folks were running from works of the Catholic Church? When you're in the throes of establishing the Protestant Reformation, listen to what that's saying. And we're doing this so that a person can actually see themselves as you feed on Calvinism and Lutheranism. You don't realize that these guys were trying to reform the Catholic Church. They weren't trying to go back to the New Testament. Not a one of them was going back to the New Testament. They were reformers. That word must sink in. They were trying to reform all of the fraud and the abuses of Catholicism. Now, if you're looking at Catholicism as your model and you're saying somewhere in Catholicism there is the truth, if we could just reform the error out, that's the wrong starting place. You need to throw it all out and go back to the Bible. Because really, Paul prophesied that this was going to happen anyway. In Acts chapter 20, he said, among yourselves, talking to the elders in Acts 20:17, talking to the elders at Ephesus, among your own selves, there were individuals being rising up, and they were going to be involved in error. And that's exactly what happened with the Catholic Church. So watch. In the 1500s, we started last week this way. Henry VIII is from late 1400 to 1500, right the same time frame. He breaks with the Catholic Church. These reformers, Martin Luther, they start getting fed up with the Catholic Church, and they basically start saying, look, we need to change this. Now, what are we changing? We're changing, man, the priest has got you from the womb to the tomb. He's got you all tied up. When you come into this world, if you don't have him christen you, if you're not baptized, you're born in sin, you're not regenerated, you can't be buried unless you got him. I mean, and you end up having to pay all kinds of things as a result of not going to church, tithing, the whole bit. Now they got you even after the tomb. They were running around trying to give you opportunities to get your relatives out of purgatory. See what I'm saying? Can it be worse than the tomb? Yeah. Even after the tomb, the priest, the pope, has got a hold to you, according to the doctrine. These fellas are seeing this, Martin Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, and they're trying to reform that. And the reason why they're getting into that particular area is because all the works that's involved in the Roman Catholic Church. Now, if we were back there with our American minds, there is no way that you would go up under a tyrant who is burning people at the stake. Would you? Well, put yourself under the Ayatollah. Just go on over to Iran, because that's what was going on. And these individuals end up fleeing from everywhere. And I did tell you last night, I think. I know I did. I don't know if any of you looked it up. Man, Geneva, isn't that ironic that Geneva Convention now is how we get our rules for peaceful engagement when you're in prison during a war? The worst place in the world for peaceful engagement with your enemy is Geneva, Switzerland. So, here we are today, and you've got and somebody might say, what are you carrying on about? We don't follow Calvin. Everybody is got Calvinism, not us. And you might say, well, if y'all don't, how come you don't? And here's the answer. Do you know there were people back there that were fighting Calvinism? They didn't believe in that. Nope, they didn't believe in born in sin. Have you never heard of them? You know why? The reason you've never heard of them is because often Do you know you can't just trust history? Who writes history? I mean, if you're American Indian and you read the history books about Andrew Jackson, why, you'll think he is the most gracious of all the presidents. But if you read Indian history, or you happen to live in northern Georgia, you'll know he was a despot. He was a tyrant, murderer also. Used the American Indians to basically clean out Florida, and then he turned around and sent them on the Trail of Tears over in Oklahoma. See, it just depends. I used to read these biographies when I was a kid. I read Andrew Jackson, man, down the Battle of the Mississippi, 1812, all that song, Johnny Horton, man, Andrew Jackson was a great guy. No. He might have been a individual that did something to keep us out of Spanish control. I don't know. But as far as being a great guy, you have to really dig in to make sure you're getting history. This book is called, it's a book about John Merton, 1620. You would just not believe. And you know what too, y'all? Here's something that I would say maybe Hollywood is doing to us. You watch a movie and you see the Three Musketeers, and you basically come back thinking that these folk over in England around 1500, 1400, 1300, you just think that, what's the guy, Johnny Depp's, he one that did the Pirates of the, you think these people are all like the Pirates of whatever that show is called. What? Caribbean. The Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, that's how our mind, listen to this. I want you to listen to how they were writing in 1620. Now I have to read it, it's in Old English, every S looks like an F. We know they hold and affirm that Adam in innocence had free will or power from the creation of God not to have sinned. F-I-N-N-E-D, that's sinned, but it's really a S. According to which power God commanded him not to sin, and threatened that if he did sin, he should die, which, being true, how are they confounded in themselves to say that Adam had power from God not to have sin, and yet God decreed that he could not but sin? That God commanded him not to sin, yet decreed that he should sin, are not these as contrary as light and darkness? Did you know that folks back in that time frame were making arguments of such conclusions using reason like that? Man, you just about have to have a chalkboard, some kind of, you do need a piece of paper to write these arguments down, because man, I mean, these guys get with it. And who were they fighting? Calvin. You ever heard of John Merton? No. Why? Because the truth generally is not in charge of history. Thus the name of the book, Muscle and Shovel. Your brain's a muscle, you got to use it. And you're going to have to get a shovel out if you're going to use it. You're going to have to dig deep. Why? Garbage, called truth, history, not history. I can show you all kinds of proofs tonight that history has been in the hands of those who are actually tyrants that you wouldn't follow for a minute. So we've looked at why people look at us the way they do. It's because they don't understand us. And we're the way we are because we would never follow a Calvin or a Luther. But yet in the United States, we get over here, and Calvin and Luther get over here through some of the individuals that came after the struggle with the Indians and whatnot, and now they're dispensing Calvinism and Lutheranism right here. Pentecostals are all in it. Wesleyans in it. Methodists are in it. All kinds of Protestant denominations, the Episcopalians and the Presbyterians. I mean, John Calvin established Presbyterian Church. They're all basically, now let's just think about this just a minute. Sometimes it's very difficult to decide how you're going to handle a thing. I'm saying John Calvin was too close to the Catholic Church to even be trusted. He was involved in Catholicism, Luther was involved in Catholicism, and they're basically fighting something that wasn't true, but they didn't know the truth when they started it. So often it is the case that individuals end up doing things because they're looking through a lens and they don't realize it. Now the Catholic Church is sitting on top of the Bible. That's their problem. Roman Catholic Church is saying the church is the authority. And the church has all these traditions and rules. And so basically you have the Bible way down here. This is a basically a cathedral, maybe the St. Peter's Basilica. It's all on top of the Bible, and you can't get to the Bible. Well, here's what the other individuals did. The Reformers, basically, as they were fighting to get rid of the church, the Roman Catholic Church, which ends up being God. I mean, the church, when we lived in the Marshalls and worked in the Gilbertese, Catholics never read the Bible. Matter of fact, the priest told them they were the Bible. I'm saying the Catholic priest told them, we are your Bible. So they just didn't too much bother with that. And so then Calvin and them began fighting against that, this authoritarian control of the church. And what happens to the church? The church fades almost totally out. That's what my visual's supposed to be. I thought it was going to go transparent. It almost fades out. And we know that's not really a church. That's some sort of a building. The church is the people. But I'm seeing the church, the importance of the church ends up fading out. When you say, well, what are you talking about? Our church, y'all are saying that y'all's church is important. Really? I thought when we actually talked to y'all about the importance of the church, you say the church doesn't matter. So here's the thing. Let me see if I can find this slide. You know what? You know how the Europeans, we were talking about the Europeans look at us? I think people in denominations do the same thing that the Europeans do to Americans. Y'all look at us, and because you don't know, if so be you have tasted that the Lord is gracious. Listen, let's talk about the Lord being gracious just a minute. If you have any kind of Calvinism in you, you believe in a God that actually tainted you, ordained that you actually be born with Adam's sin. Now, you've got to make up for that. That's what Calvin was doing. He didn't get rid of Augustine. Augustine was a Catholic. Augustine in 400 something basically came up with this idea of born in sin. Now, I want to tell you this. You might be saying, you know, Johnny, this is what people do to you on television. They actually bring up stuff, try to bring up the Greek and stuff like that and raise the argument to the point where regular people can't get involved in it. And you might be saying, well, Johnny's doing that too. He's talking about 400 A.D. Look, you know what this is? This is volume 7 of History of the Christian Church by Schaff. This is all over the internet. This book has been around since the 1800s. This is a scholarly, all the denominational preachers around here worth their salt, they got the whole set. You don't have to buy the set. The individuals that wrote in 100, 200, and 300, they're called the Apostolic Fathers. Guess what? They're all in just 1 or 2 volumes. I would dare to say that on Amazon it's not $10. You don't have to buy all 13, isn't it, James? Something like that, 18 volumes to get the entire, man, there's a lot of stuff. Did you know that stuff is written down? It is. And it's available. And these fellows study it. And you can look in here and you can see none of those guys 300 years after Christ, they were not teaching born in sin. That was for Augustine to start. So you see, when Calvin came along with his doctrine of grace only, and Luther, faith only, they were actually trying to fix God. Because God put you in Adam's DNA, some of them say, in you, and now you're a fallen nature. No, you got to fix God with that doctrine. You haven't tasted the Lord that He's gracious. Now watch this. Here's what you would need to do. You know, these Europeans come over here, and once they get over here, Christopher Hitchens, y'all remember him? God is not great. He was so happy when Jerry Falwell died, said he's in hell, had him on CNN. That dude is in hell. That's what he said. Christopher Hitchens moved over here. How many other Brits have moved over here? These guys love it over here. Once they get over here, and the gun toting and all that, they get to see it. These folk are free. You know what you ought to do? Since the pastor says that the church don't matter, why don't you just leave your denomination for a while and become a member of the Church of Christ and taste it before you say, I don't like it. I mean, you don't like me down in yours, but once you get inside, I guarantee you'll be throwing rocks at your pastor. I'm telling you, you haven't tasted the Lord is gracious. We're not over here thinking God started us out with a minus. You know what a zero is? You started out as a zero. We started out at 100% in the church that Jesus built. Now, doesn't that make a difference about how you feel about God? It's no wonder that this dude over here, 34 years in a radical acting theater club or something of that nature, it's no wonder that he chunked the Southern Baptists. I mean, you start out as a zero. I mean, Tim Whitehart gets up in the pulpit and calls his baby an angel and then says she's a little devil. I mean, what in the world? You ought to just, to be consistent, really, to be consistent, when somebody says that it doesn't matter what church you're in, if you hear your pastor say it on our TV program, come on over and try us out. And I can tell you this, you'll like me better than you're going to like your pastor. I guarantee you. Now you might say, man, that is a brag. Listen, I rub shoulders with these pastors all the time. I'm in line with them at different places, and you know what all of them are doing? Can I get a discount? Even my mechanic, not the one I'm using now, but the one I used to use over on wherever, he told me that every pastor that came in there wanted a discount, and I'm giving him a tip. What Kohler Road. Yesterday, day before yesterday, Caleb and I went, Micah, Caleb, and Tony, Christina, I don't know if she was all the way in it. We were all ready to go and put the camera on this guy. So we stayed here, Tony, Christina, and I stayed here. Micah, Caleb, and one of the cameramen went. Now I'm just making a story here. When we got through, I gave him $100. And I could have given him $60, and he'd been just as happy as he could be. But you know what? I love God, not money. I don't care anything about money. God is the one who's taking care of me. It didn't hurt me one bit to give him $100. I didn't know his wife was a secretary, and I walked in up to the TV station, and his wife was a secretary. Man, she come out saying, "Hi, Johnny." Well, I'm not trying to buy her favor, but I'm just saying, all these pastors are constantly trying to get a discount, nickel and dime you to death. Is any of them out here? This fella here, Eugene said we wasn't coming back here next year, so. Oh man, last thing he asked me when I saw him the other day, am I going to give him my $100 tip? Seriously? I don't mind giving him $100 either. I love this place. But I'm just saying, that's the way it goes. And I'm not going to do you that way. You know what? And one of the reasons I wouldn't do you that way, and I'm not a pastor anyway, I wouldn't do you that way because the brethren here wouldn't put up with it. And say amen. All right. They would not put up with it. I'm just saying, y'all help me out here. Y'all know that I don't nickel and dime anybody to death. We are a people who are not concerned about that kind of stuff. We're concerned about the truth. Now I'm saying, if you don't know what it's really like, I'm just saying, could it be you're like a European looking at Americans and saying, what in the world? And Americans going to be one to help you out when another Hitler comes along. And here you are saying things about the Church of Christ. You never tasted it, never tried it, and your pastor's making sure you don't, and you start out as a zero when you're born in sin. Now, I want to show you that I'm right about this Catholicism and church business and how these fellas argued so hard against church tradition that they ended up wiping out the importance of the church. And you know that in one sense that I'm right because of the way everybody does talk about the churches, and you see your daughters marrying another denomination and they go ahead and go on over there and you don't pitch a fit, maybe a little bit, mama might, but then they just go on because, after all, it's all the same, isn't it? Well, look at this. Do you realize what you are saying when you say the church is not important? Just a scan of the New Testament. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. Do you know how the church is depicted in the New Testament? If I was to talk about your mother right now, I bet you'd get excited, wouldn't you? I'm just going to say something about my cousin's mother. Man, I'm not. But I'm just saying, you done started it, hadn't you? Fighting words. And here an individual says the church is not important. And basically Paul brings up in Galatians 4 he brings up the handmaid of Abraham and his wife. And he says the handmaid basically genders or is comparable to Jerusalem that was then. And Sarah is the Jerusalem which is above, the mother of us all. Basically, she was the real wife, and the spiritual part, or the spiritual direction from whence we all came, or Jesus came, and then we end up being in Jesus' church, which is the mother of us all. Who's going to talk about the mother like my mama? She's just not important. She never was important. Not going to do it. But that's what they do, and the reason why is because Luther and them were fighting against church tradition being everything on top of the Bible. See, they didn't even realize what they were throwing out. Now look at this, Hebrews 12:18. You might say, well, I didn't really get that business about Jerusalem which is above. You know why? Because that's not a part of your basic theology. Man, if you're in the Church of Christ, let me tell you something. You know Christ's name is on it, and it belongs, Church of Christ, that means that it belongs to Him. We're talking about ownership. When you're in the Church of Christ, I'm telling you, the church is important. It don't make the rules. The head is Jesus, and the rule book is Jesus' book. But if you're in Jesus' church, which is called the mother of us all, the Jerusalem which is above, let's look at this. In Hebrews, the writer does it again, and he says, for you are not coming to the mount that might be touched. And he's talking to them about Mount Sinai. When they got the law at Mount Sinai, that's kind of a pictorial of what it would be like. It was a mountain, it was on fire, it was belching smoke, thunder, earthquake, and they were scared to death. And Moses was up in there getting the law. It was designed to impress upon their minds. And he says, you didn't come to that kind of mountain. Well, what in the world did we come to that can outdo that? I mean, wouldn't you have liked to have been back there? No. They were so scared. They said, don't let God ever speak to us again. Let Moses speak to us. The Bible says in Hebrews 12 that Moses quaked and was afraid. So what could be bigger? What could be more important than that? Well, look what he says. In verse 22, he says, you're not coming to that mountain. You're coming to Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God. Here it is. The heavenly Jerusalem, the mother of us all, which is above, the heavenly Jerusalem. And to innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven. This general assembly is basically the Greek idea of pan. You know, when we say Pan-America, or you say pantheon, or you say pantheism, it's basically pantheism is when you worship all kinds of gods. Everything's God. This is the agora, or the marketplace, or the gathering place, and it's pan-agora. It's all of the saints that have ever gone before. These are the individuals that are in the heavenly Jerusalem. It's the general assembly. Look, innumerable company of angels. Don't tell me that the church is not important. Now see, a lot of these people, they think that's in heaven. I'm talking about they think that you cannot experience the heavenly Jerusalem here. He's telling them they are in the heavenly Jerusalem. We are coming to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. That's what the church is. And when you enter it, it is magnificent to envision the idea that now we are in the cloud of witnesses that's talked about in Hebrews 12. We basically are in with Abraham and Moses and Elijah. That's what he's basically talking about. They're in the general assembly, and we get the chance to sit in heavenly places. 2 Corinthians 11, verse 2, for I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. Now we're using another figure. Oh, the church is not important. Let somebody say that. Anybody here got a fiance right now? We don't have any persons that are engaged. Man, you talk about somebody's fiance. There's a movie called The Searchers, and can't remember Festus. You old folks in here know who Festus is. He's playing the part, and he basically sees somebody else that thinks they're going to marry his fiancée, and he said, "Get your hands off my fiancée." Listen, folks, You don't talk about somebody's fiancé. And here is what Paul says the church is. I mean, when we hear people say the church don't matter, we cringe. Man, please, I hope Jesus doesn't hear you say that. The mother of us all, heavenly Jerusalem, where the general assembly and innumerable company of angels are actually involved. And you talking about the church don't matter. See, that's because Calvin and Luther actually took you way past Jerusalem when they were running from Rome. That's all that is. They were trying to get away from the Holy Roman Catholic Church, and they ran right past Jerusalem on their way out. And see, we're basically saying that proves what we're saying. And then on top of that, you end up being born without any chances. You're born in sin, and you got to fix God up, and you got to make it so that since you didn't do anything to get that way, you don't have to do anything to get out. God does it for you. You're dead. Debate these guys on television, and they just laugh at us and say, y'all don't realize before you were actually saved, you were dead. Like, go out to the cemetery and talk to a grave, what one of them told me. See if you get any response. Silliness. Even he went so far, the Primitive Baptist Church goes so far to say that you don't even need to preach. It's really pointless to preach. He says pointless to debate. Wasn't nobody going to be saved by his side of the debate. I agree with him. But I'm saying that was his doctrine, that the preaching of the gospel doesn't do anything. The Holy Spirit has to operate on you, and you have to be one of the elect anyway. That's what Calvin taught. Why would you take part of Calvin's doctrine and not all of it? Says that only the people that were predestined, elected before the beginning of the world, they're the only ones going to be saved. And the rest of them, they're not going to be saved anyway. And then if you are saved, you can't be lost. You talk about degradation of our nation. Go back and read what Luther said about the town that he lived in and preached the majority of his career. He told his wife, I want to leave this Sodom. All you have to do is get on the internet and type in Luther says his city is Sodom. I guarantee you'll get some books where you'll read a letter that he wrote to his wife where he actually called his headquarters Sodom. You're talking about the champion name of the Reformation movement couldn't even influence his own area. And then you turn around and look at Danville, the city of churches, and we have a crime rate that actually violent crime exceeds Greensboro. Why? Once saved, always saved. Don't tell me that people don't take that to heart now. If you're raised all your life being told once you're saved you cannot be lost, do not tell me that that does not engender misbehavior. I'm scared to death of hell. Well, you're one of the saved. And so was Paul. He said he could become a reprobate. We're not studying that tonight, but I'm just saying. Ephesians 5:31. Here we go again. Now we've got a virgin, your fiancé. We've got the mother of us all. We've got the heavenly Jerusalem that we get to participate in. If you become a member of the Lord's church, I mean, you start feeling like something. And now they're going to say, well, y'all are boasting. Well, let me tell you what, I'm pretty excited about being in Jesus' church. Thank you very much. Amen. Very excited. And the figures that he puts forth and the way that he feels about us, I am truly blessed. And I could not imagine being in a church that didn't matter. As a matter of fact, I get out of it because I don't need it to go to heaven. So why in the world am I paying some preacher who is beating me to death for a tip all the time? And that's what they said over to Baptist Church in Martinsville. He said, if you're not a tither, you're either a thief or a tipper because you sure ain't giving 10%. See how they talk to you? Anybody in here remember me preaching over 5 lessons on giving in the entire time you've known me? I don't know how many lessons I preach, but I know if I was preaching all the time, you'd be holding your hand up and say, I do. I don't have to preach on giving. You know why? People in the Church of Christ are thrilled to give. I mean, the tent's already paid for. You're feeling it right now. If you've been up under this tent and you plan to come to this tent, we won't nickel and dime. Do you know what? Everything we have. Did y'all see what I did with that other book? Muscle Shovel. Everything we have is free. I don't sell anything. If I buy it with funds that brethren out of here give me, you think I'm fixing to sell it? Man, God give me this increase, bless me. And then the guy that wrote this book, he tried to give me $1,000 a month. What? You see what I'm saying? That's people in the Church of Christ. He said, Johnny, I'll let you have $1,000 a month. I said, man, Michael, I can't take your books. I got money. Brethren, help me. Well, I don't know if you can get what it costs for this book. I said, I don't need what it costs for this book. I'll buy the book with the money that brethren give me, and then I'll give it away, as many as I can. So he sent me, I don't know how many cases, 13 cases anyway, just to get it started. Listen, folks, I'm saying you can feel it already. You're experiencing it, in that we're not even trying to get you to do anything in the plate. Ephesians 5:31, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Would you let somebody talk about your wife? You see, this is where we really are. You know why I don't get violent or upset on TV? Caleb's wife paid me a big compliment here the other night. You wondered how long it was going to be before I told that, didn't you? I did a TV show, one of the few I've done in a while, and Ariel heard this guy call in, and I probably told him at least 4 times, maybe more, sir, turn your TV down. We're hearing the echo. Sir, turn your TV down. When you call in live, talk to us on your phone, not to your TV. Sir, turn your TV down. And she said, look how polite he is. Well, the next guy that called, I actually was in the middle of saying, what does the Bible say, or something like that, and I said, what? And that's all I got out. So I kind of ruined it. But I'm saying, it doesn't matter what they say to me. I'm defending Jesus' wife. I'm defending the mother of us all if you're in the church. I'm defending the chaste virgin of Jesus Christ. This is not about me. You can talk about me. I don't like it too much when you talk about Lori, but I let people talk about Lori too. I mean, people have trashed every member of my family except my grandson. I think they just maybe don't know I've got one, and I'm alerting them now. It doesn't matter. Why? Because it's all about the Lord, and it's all about this wonderful blessing of being in His church and being born. Let's talk about born in sin. Just a second. We're going to go some more on this on another night. Ephesians 5:23, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. Look at this. I'm not really going to have to really spend any time on this, because they don't have a verse that says you're born in sin, and I have one absolute that says you're not. You get Ezekiel 18:20 for me, and we'll just have you read it out loud in a minute. And that's all we're going to say about it. Look at this. Here's their verse. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Now watch this. As and so, this is an as and so statement. As by one man sin entered into the world, so death passed upon all men. How did sin enter into the world? This is exactly what the Bible says. James is a pretty significant individual in the Bible, and Ophil too. This is a significant statement. Notice this. James basically gives commentary on this statement.
On the slide.
Yeah, I'm searching, aren't I? Thank you. Now that was helpful. James 1:13. 14. You see that every right there? Every man, as sin entered into the world by that one man, so death passed upon all. As and so. How's it work? Every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it's finished, bringeth forth death. In every man. You weren't born a zero. You weren't born with Adam's sin. As a matter of fact, there's a wonderful piece of information that Luther needs to grab a hold to. And here's the difference between me and the denominational preachers. I'll back this stuff up. We're going to let people ask questions. Matter of fact, we would love for somebody, and this is not like we're going to get down here and wrestle, and we're not going to be violent. We would love for somebody to bring their pastor back in here and defend this stuff. We've done it on television. We got a challenge out for anybody that can defend born in sin, really defend it. The Primitive Baptists can't do it. He tried 3 times. They're done. Every man. And then Paul said, for I was alive without the law once. See, the law doesn't even get to you for a certain amount of time. He says, I was without the law. That's why Jesus said, let the little children come unto me. I was without the law once. Look at this. Romans 4:15, and you stay in Romans and use all of it. Because the law worketh wrath, for where no law is, there is no transgression. That's exactly why he says, I was alive. He didn't start as a 0. They got it backwards. He was once alive, and then he died, just like Adam. Now somebody says, well, now wait a minute. So what you're saying is something that I just can't fathom. Let me just ask you this. I just want you to think about this. You're saying to me that when you're born, you think that somehow or other God is responsible for you sinning. And you think that's something against God and that you're tainted. Can I just ask you to think about this? I don't know if everybody here has a computer, but I'm pretty sure everybody knows a little something about a computer. A computer comes programmed, and you know what? The first one Lori and I got, one night we stayed up till about 1 or 2 in the morning wondering if we could push the off button. This is way back there when we got about 500 megabytes on a big one. 500 megabytes. Man, you can't even do this lesson with 500 megabytes. And there we were wondering, will it come back on if we turn it off? Somebody gave it to us. We're scared to death. Now, hey, we told Lori's mama, if you make a mistake, just turn it off and turn it back on. It's programmed for stupidity. I mean, they are. They're programmed because they know the stuff. You didn't come programmed like that. Do you know in order not to sin, you would have to have every rule and regulation that God has pre-programmed into your little baby brain. Now think about that. You don't know all of God's law when you're born. Well, that means I'm making mistakes right and left. So what? You're without the law when you're a child. You start out alive, not a 0. And then you come to a time when sin revives and you die. You get to the point where you're now responsible. I mean, seriously. God is not going to hold you responsible for all of the things that He has said when you don't know anything but mama. I mean, that just makes no sense, does it? Now, what you might be saying, well, Johnny, why in the world did these guys with such brains that I read from the 1620, and I'm saying they got brains, why did they get so messed up? Because they were fighting blind themselves. They were looking through the lens of the Roman Catholic Church in the first place. From their birth up, they'd been taught this garbage. And so when they're trying to get out of it, they don't even know what they're getting into. And as we said, they ran past Jerusalem on their way out of Rome. They were so, and I'm glad they got out of Rome. I mean, everything they wrote wasn't wrong. But I'm saying Calvin produced a church government that nobody in the entire Protestant world uses except the Presbyterians. Nobody else uses that government. He doesn't know the difference between a bishop and an elder. There is no difference between a bishop and an elder. But he's made elders down here, he calls them laity, and the bishops are up here. And they're the same people. They're recorded right there in Acts chapter 20. Same individuals, elders, bishop, pastor, all those same words. Now, look at this. And we'll be just done right here. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Let me look down here just a minute. I know I'm not in 1 Corinthians, am I? Yeah, I'm saying 13. Notice this. We're talking about somebody might having a hard time with the business about you were without the law. Look at this. See that? When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. That's why we don't baptize 6, 7, 8-year-old kids in here. You think God's sending somebody that don't understand, their brain is not even developed? to be able to understand things that men and women, they baptize men and women. We don't baptize kids in the Lord's church because the Lord don't damn kids. They're safe. I was a child. I spake as a child. I mean, the stuff these little kids say, I mean, Tanner's just getting to the point where I'm starting to realize that he's got a good brain. How old are you, 15? I thought as a child, but when I became a man, put away childish things. See, when you become a Christian, if you start acting up, we're going to withdraw from you. We don't care what your mama or your daddy says. What? Yeah. If you say you're a Christian, you're basically saying that you're an individual who's put away childish things. And your mom and daddy are not in charge of your spiritual welfare to the point where they say, well, I know they're messing up, but we'll take care of it. If they're messing up and they continue to mess up, we're talking to them, not you. So if you're thinking about having your babies baptized, you better be thinking twice, because that's the way it is in the Lord's church. That's just the way it is. Now, see how different this is, but look at how the scriptures are. And just think, if this is true, now it seems foreign to you, but just think about being a zero. It may be foreign. Think about these Europeans that look at us and they say, man, them guys, them Yanks, they some, yeah, we saved y'all twice. And we'll do it again if God doesn't leave us because of our depraved behavior and the silliness that's going on in denominations, because denominations is ruining the United States. I mean, it's just people are turning into skepticism and atheism right and left as a result of it. So tonight, how about it? Your church doesn't matter. Guarantee I can get it out of your pastor. You don't tell him what I'm going to talk about, and I'll get him to say it doesn't matter. That's all you have to do is say, do you have to be in your church to go to heaven? No. You just told you it don't matter. I mean, you sitting right here, you can say, do I have to be in the church I'm in to go to heaven? If I say yes, then I'm saying the church is important. And the pastor will try to say, well, they're saying the church saves you. No, we didn't. We know Jesus saves you, but Jesus is not saving people that's not in his church. I said I'll quit, but I'll give you this one. And I think that it's pretty sure that you know from being with us or hearing us how to get in it. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. What is the body? We know the church is a body. Jesus is the Savior of the church, of the body, which is the church. Now then, you have to be in the body to be saved? Yes, you do. Well, do you have to be in the church? And put all things under his feet, same book, Ephesians 1:22, and gave him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body. Church and body are the same thing. Got to be in it. Jesus is the Savior of it. It's his wife. It's the mother of us all. It is the heavenly Jerusalem, and it is a wonderful thing that you will want to defend. You won't let other members say my church either, because it don't belong to us. And we sure don't make the rules in it. And we watch each other too. That means we take care of each other. Man, this is so good. I'm saying if you haven't been involved in it, you're missing something. It thrills us. And look at us go. See, I'm talking to people on TV now. Look at us go. You know who is the most known persons in Danville religiously on the streets? It ain't the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses around here. Man, they have the police coming out all the time, checking on us. It's not because we're misbehaving, it's just because we're out there all the time. In Martinsville, Danville, over in Eden, sometimes Reedville, sometimes Mayodan, Madison. Look at us go. Oh, y'all think y'all working yourself to help? No, we don't. But boy, I tell you what, we're wound up tight as a $2 watch about being in Jesus' church. You might want to taste some of it. It is wonderful. And let me tell you something, the water's fine. The water's fine. It's not going to hurt you to get wet. You're going to have to get wet in your church sometime or other anyway, unless you're in one of these Presbyterian Church Episcopalians where they just sprinkle you. That's not baptizing you. That's sprinkling water. You have to be immersed. You're the subject of that. You have to be immersed into Christ, Romans 6:3-4. Now, everything's prepared. I've tried my very best, and I almost made myself sick worrying over whether or not I could convince you that the Church of Christ matters. I just don't even know why I have to say that. The Church of Christ don't matter? Oh man, I hope that you believe the Church of Christ matters and that you realize how wonderful the doctrine is. It's not Catholicism. See, They try to tell you that we're in Catholicism when they're really the ones who are more in the Catholic. They're just fighting against the idea that the church is everything, and they've dispensed with it almost totally, and they're trying to make up for being a zero, fixing God up with grace alone, faith alone, and then you're saved for the rest of your life. It's just almost like having a priest and doing some little penance or something, and your other family member get you out of purgatory. I mean, you didn't even have to do it. But in the true church, it just all makes sense. Now, I'm beating around the bush, Joey, on purpose. I just wonder if somebody is going to obey the gospel. And the only thing we know to do is just give you a minute. And Joey's picked out a song that'll make us think, and you rest, and you tell me, you tell yourself, why am I not a member of the Church of Christ? It's in the Bible. They can answer anybody. My pastor's not going to show up. No pastor's going to show up. We go to their house to find them, and they get angry, call the police. They get violent with us. When we go to their assemblies that they advertise question and answers, they arrest us. Micah, take the city, actually have us fight the entire city, lawyer squad, city attorney. We win that too. I mean, God's on our side. Now, sooner or later, somebody's going to hurt us. But we're still going for that too. Now, why? The Baptists have a book where they talk about the Middle District Baptist Association. They celebrate their preachers being in jail. I get the book, and the actual book says the first church in Chesterfield County was the Church of Christ. But nevertheless, they're celebrating going to jail for being instigators. That's what it was. They were being instigators of the Church of England. They put them in jail. And I get over here to Martin Avenue, and a woman says, nobody wants you over here. What's wrong with you? Well, didn't nobody want your preacher in Chesterfield either, and they put him in jail. Well, come to find out, he wasn't a Baptist preacher anyway. So now it all makes sense. See, I'm circling the airport, Micah, but I'm wondering if somebody wants to get on. Get on board. You be in the Lord's church, and you can defend Jesus' bride, the virgin, chaste virgin, the mother of us all, a heavenly Jerusalem. I don't have anything else to say. If Jesus' words won't do it, and the documents that we showed, and the evidence, maybe you need some more time, come back, and we'll study this some more. Come if you're convinced while we stand and sing.
At this moment, as you're having a thought about what was presented to you, I'd like to just amplify, if I can, by going to John chapter 4 and verse number 20, and consider, all of us consider the effort that goes into these type of lessons. If you take a really curious person, like the woman in John chapter 4 verse 20, you're going to end up having discussions that people have been arguing about for years. And what Johnny just presented has been going on for more than 500 years. And we are the only group that's willing to have the discussion, let alone beat it back. She said, our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem, the place where men ought to worship. Our fathers. The lesson that he just presented, did God actually give you a zero when you started out, just starting out with God, already against God, wicked, depraved? And your grandparents have been arguing this. My grandparents have been arguing this. Dad already presented a lesson where both my grandfather, his grandfather, arguing this in the Methodist Church. Where did God start us out? Born in sin? And if we're started out born in sin, what type of hope do we have? This is the type of discussions we're wanting to have with you. And if you have a question about it, we're willing to take it. Just show of hands. Does anybody tonight, visitor, have a question about what the information we discussed? Okay. No questions. Thank you again for being here tonight. We're going to be back here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And as he presented the idea of Calvinism and the horrible presentation that it puts us with God, one of the things that they are saying is we're not going to be able to do any works. And so what does that mean? You're going to be saved by grace alone because you're so depraved you can't do anything. Well, tomorrow night we're going to answer that. You can do good things. You can do works. And then they say, well, it's still not the works that save you. We're going to talk about that tomorrow night at 7. There's no questions. We're going to go ahead and end now. We're going to have a closing prayer. We'll ask James Ofield if he'll come up and lead us in our closing prayer. And after that, we encourage everybody to mix, mingle, and be friendly with one another.
Views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the state.